Alright, I'm going to Lamrim, ya, Sonya di Gibu Chung, and Jing Chimbo Sum Ye, Delia, and the data Tumbig, that Chiva in the Lam Yamle Chiadi, and Gibu Chung, Jing da Tumo Lam Gormission Chiva, the Gibu Chung said the Liang and the Gena, Setism Ye, and the Chige Garsuri, and Deva. Legal Hulin, Zoji, Yawachimasum, Gerat Mata, Zo Citizen, and Dondala some Nalegan, Jigores, Gibuchunse. And in Nashi, that is Jig de Gibu, and Yawa Dina Chimani, Chimazo, Chejan, indeed Dondala, Chimi Dondala, and then when you go on to a tabloid position in Gibu, Yungores, and the Rimle Soyaki, that Gibuchumi. Gisedi and the Chimadires, Nibu Chimag sometime give with the SH. On those year. Tis the names are done, Lemons the Givuchumi Lam Sedi, Setisam Gasur Giva Chimong, Yoko, some Drudige, Lam Yamling, but the Dingo Mares, the Givuchunus Lam Lechi Sedi, Givuchun no Tumo Lam del Chigores, or the Kazan, Givuchumi Tumo Lam Sedi, on those chants did decore by you or
Good morning. So last night we recommenced looking at this Lamrim text, which is presented in accordance with the trainings that are shared with beings of three capacities. And last night in particular we looked at the practitioner of initial capacity, seeing that there are different ways that different types of practitioners of initial capacity. There are those who are focused primarily on achieving this life's pleasures and overcoming this life's problems. And then there are those who are focused primarily on achieving a good rebirth in their very next life. And therefore they engage in practices such as ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance. So that the first type of practitioner is someone mainly focused on this life's pleasures. But the second type is the actual practitioner of initial capacity, and if their determination to ensure they achieve an excellent rebirth is uncontrived, they have a path of a practitioner of initial capacity. But there's the third type of practitioner of initial capacity, and the Lamrim is primarily focused on such a practitioner. That is the person who's engaging in the trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. So their goal is beyond attaining merely a good rebirth in their next life. The actual practitioner of initial capacity, that is their goal, to achieve a good rebirth in their next life. But the Lamrim is focused more on practitioners who engage in trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. So they're engaging in the same practices, but with a far greater goal in mind.
That indicate that it's not give Jing said, and the Koyudunga Tada Rani Tarba some don't get some don't get Kansati that give Jing che, the Niki Gunya give Jing che. She's not that Lamrim Soyaki give Jingi Lam Yirimba, Tumo Lam Yirimba Sungur Mado, Rang Koyudunga Tada Rani Tarba Duni Dumba, Dumbi Simbi Geda Lamdi Shigo Males, that the Garson. Korea를 줘야지 탈바 코와를 줘 코와를 끼어는 코와를 줘는 탈바 토고도 선배선모디 내가 랑든도 토고 받아 랑든 멤버 지금 그러와 진짜 디네자 랑든 랑 점도 써야지 근데 디승고 말 제가 다디디 기부 징게 남는 치세야지 기부 투모 가서 징다 투모와는 미진 바를 치세야지 디승고 애제로 와다 지바로 충분다 징다 써야지.
And of the beings of three varying capacities, that was, we looked mainly at the being of initial capacity. But the practitioner of intermediate capacity, their great goal that they're striving to achieve is liberation from cyclic existence in its entirety. So they are striving to achieve their own individual liberation from the suffering realms of samsara and attain lasting peace. But the Lamrim, whilst presenting the trainings that such a practitioner would engage in, presents them within the context of striving for an even greater goal than individual liberation. And therefore, when the Lamrim presents the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, they are presenting it in the context of the trainings shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. In other words, not for someone merely with a goal of individual liberation, but rather someone who is engaging in those same trainings, but to achieve an even greater goal. We return to the text, and in the handout, we're in the middle of page 79, right in the middle of it. In the published book, nearing the bottom of page 69, starting with the sentence, rather, we should consider certain paths common to those two to be preliminary practices leading to the path of persons of great capacity, and take them to be part of or branches of the training in the path of persons of great capacity.
Dini dang se tumo lam kashi se dini da se de kiwu chungwa che dene kiwu jing che ni se de jisa dini dang tumo lam kashi se da da tumo lam chasan kashi ji she wa le sung go le je da jisa da dina de da de kiwu chungwa lam rin ba chi den jing te ba chi lam chi go wa dene so ya de dang bo tumo lam se de kiwu chungwa dang an jing yi da tumo lam kashi da sung go le Di sungo ba de karasne kibu chimbiga lam la chibiga ngondro chis jisan kibu chimbe tyaba chimbe lam nyamlen dimba la nye le ya ko le ya di lobjong chiya de ngondro le ya nye la jang go ya di lushine kibu chungo da tumwa lam yirin ba de jang dene kibu chiya jing da tumwa lam yirin ba de jang anne di jang sewe che la anne ko kibu chimbe lam yirin ba de den go go de jesa dene za ko ya la se de da de ya la se jidan 行道的做了的原来是穷修的下个了，就是在的年数连做的贴吧前面去年数连接，他做这的我了呀的，的年们也会原来的我了呀，那年数连过来的个原来是的，几乎穷我他妈那别人把他，这个他妈那别人把的，我都是现在点个来着的。
So looking at the sentence then, rather we should consider certain paths common to those two to be preliminary practices. So to those two, that refers to the trainings of a practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity. So this is referring to practitioners who are actually the actual practitioner of initial capacity and the actual practitioner of intermediate capacity. So those who've given rise to this determination to achieve either good rebirth or liberation from samsara, most of their practice, the trainings they engage in, are shared or common to a practitioner of great capacity. So therefore, those trainings should be considered to be preliminary practices leading to the path of persons of great capacity. In other words, so just like a tree, read it a bit further, and take them to be parts of or branches of the training in the path of persons of great capacity. So the meaning is then that the trainings of the practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity, they should be considered the preliminaries to engage in order to actually become a practitioner of great capacity. And in this way, they would be seen, these preliminary practices are actually parts of or branches of the trainings of a practitioner of great capacity.
Chetu chewe dusha che sonsa di da, chetu chewe dusha di zo kanda chile sonwa re lamna, dangbo kansa di mi chigli ya, kansa chigli ya, kwa kiwu chungya lam, tumowa lam irin bade pa lobchong de di changju, di ya os yarge zhodu, dine kiwu chungya tumowa samba de pa changju, yarge chi, de yarge zhodu dine, tabachimbe lam yirimba tienje dushine 미지 가사지만 림바진 두시는 롭장제네 tabachimbe lamne tiedi disungore.
So therefore, someone who engages in the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, they should initially engage in the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. And building on the capacity that they developing within themselves, they then thereafter engage in the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And based on the developing of those qualities within, developing their own inner capacity, they then become suitable to engage in the actual trainings that are unique or uncommon to a practitioner of great capacity.
다디 내가 불 되니게 냠는 제고 고갑 메디칸 지어로와다 다디니 이제 다게와 나송의 동아들 타고도 되니게 고갑 예딩들 되네 코로나 기부충 투모에 기부충에 남지 딩거로와다 그래서 나송의 동아를 타고 나송라드네 냐와이다 둔로에 강아드네 요딜에 타와다 사람이 고봉문도 고바토네 야고요라세 지나다 문도 고바토비 탑람데디 코롱다 가사 코롱 코롱레 타바세디 tarba tamji kemba se de di samno de yungo ma de 내가 된 바이네 콜이야 대하게 가서를 뇌도 rungo 말에 제 때내 판도 매발에 진짜 된 코로나야 내 기후 충을 남기린 바 된두고는 판도 여바는 될래 기후 충을 남기린 바 따다 결혼 하나 미고원 토고 디톱네 야고열에서 디토에 탐는 되는 신념는 제거를 해야 돼 내가 지금 원조고 와점 토에게 남띵을 내 기후 충을 남기린 바 띵걸 디가사 코로나.
And for those people for whom the thought of striving for and attaining liberation and enlightenment doesn't draw them, if they don't have the disposition to be drawn towards striving for a great goal such as individual liberation or enlightenment, then they will be guided just in the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity. They'll be guided to become an actual practitioner of initial capacity. In other words, they'll be guided so that they strive to ensure they achieve an excellent rebirth in their next life. Because in accordance with their own disposition, their own imprints, that is as far as their capacity can be developed for now.
Dina shin da gibu jinge lamjiri mo ngone gibu linge lamjiri mo ngone tiandi da di gansa kargorosne dine gansa dele kon korwe dungala tarduge samba yobache da chedele san ye goma sa de ngi top tugu mar di nyamne jigme sembe samlo jorwada dine ge gansa khoronlia anida ankeronne korwe dungala je tabatomne san ye goma tomadine tarotomne jigire dipe hago arsen dine taba토에게 nyamne den유도 코로나야 또 코로나 탈바점 토백이 된도 여바 나신 코로나야 탈바점 토백이 탑람디 내갑들 두스팅 거로 받아지 제자디 땡세 가사 코로나야 디 탈바점 토백이 람냠는 땡세 가사들 디녀라 아니 기부 충우기 투모람이를 받이 땡고 지발다 콜이야 기부 충우 투모람이를 충우람이 맞대 바지 충우다 투모람이를 받대 데네 땡세에 제려야 아니 코로나야 아니 기부 징잠기 타바점 토되게 람냠ling 림바디 바티 띵고레스 제나디 데네게 땡사 가사 코로 산지고 뭐 토예기 되바 매바레 제가 매바전 콜리아 타바치메 최냠는 덴바이나 내가 땡게 덴도 미루와레 제가 덴나 판도 제라 일리고 매바자 두스티네 안 코로나 타르바팀 탈비 탑란 때문에 코로나 판도 체요 제가 내가 덴이 실팅고레 제레.
But there certainly are practitioners for whom hearing about individual liberation, complete freedom from the suffering realms of samsara, that draws them, that inspires them, and they develop a wish to achieve such a state. So such a practitioner then, because they are in dependence on their particular imprints and disposition, they have an inclination towards attaining liberation. When they hear about Buddhahood, they don't have a yearning to become a Buddha. This is something that doesn't draw them, but individual liberation does. So they would be guided to become a practitioner, an actual practitioner of intermediate capacity, someone who is striving for individual liberation. But to become an actual practitioner of intermediate capacity, they first need to be guided to cultivate the trainings that are shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. So they will start at that same starting point to develop those qualities within themselves, to develop that own mental capacity that is shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. And that is their foundation to then later engage in the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity. So they will need to first develop those trainings shared with the practitioner of initial capacity in order to have that inner strength of mind of mind to be able to become a practitioner of intermediate capacity.
Density, that Asa Chidu, Duja Koronka, Chadugurua. Says that Lamrim Ma Soye Chidu Dujetilla, Zan Dambo Gibu Chumuda, Chumulam Yirimatim Bajet, Tumoalam Yiribate, the Dikibu Jingilam Yirimatim, but you would drink the Tumoalam Yiribate, then the Tapachimam, Digasa Chikma, Shimbashi Yachidu, Gaza Chikte Chiduja.
And the Lamrim itself is presented in the sequence of trainings. So we have here in the titles of these outlines, the graduated guidance or sequential guidance that a particular individual needs to be led along to cultivate initially the skill, the capacity within that is shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, and independence on that foundation to be guided thereafter in the trainings that follow in the text, which are the trainings which are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And as those are cultivated within, their qualities become, or their capacity becomes such that they are able to become an actual practitioner of great capacity. So this is the reason why the Lamrim is presented in this particular sequence of trainings.
나지산 최소야디 두지마 냠는 지겐기 코론 감나 메바다 낸 튠바 코론야 디제 투게기 니바 가르스도 모두 대신 코론 가르제 투게기 코론래 줍투고요바 니바요바나 디다디디 딩고로 지자 감나 메바 코론기 냠는 지게기 아니 니바 가르스도 될 튠베토네 안데 지게 마 튀고바 인자 안데 그래도
So from this presentation this morning, and combining it with what we looked at last night, we see there really is tremendous variety amongst beings. And this comes back down to their own individual karmic backgrounds and spirit, and thereby their own individual spiritual dispositions. Some then are just drawn to becoming an actual practitioner of initial capacity. Others see that goal as not that important, only important in a temporary sense, but they see the attainment of a goal of individual liberation. That draws them very strongly. Still others, though, are drawn to the great goal, the goal of enlightenment. And then combining this understanding with what we looked at last night, we get an idea for the breadth of individual spiritual dispositions amongst beings.
이상 잡아지 미취디 약쇼레 다 산요고모토에 딜레라와 요마레 결혼 인지미지 잡아지 미취냐면 산요고모토바 지역으로서 우주제베네 매니 데니게 되바메나 뉴바메델레 데니 우주이디 장주베네 딜레 안판도에 뇌게냐요 다디 추면 때가 데 장면에서 제사디네 용거 말아 제사 뉴발레 되오레세데 탐담베바 그런 게 치두지 뉴발레 파티에서 송고레세 취 산이 취 송야디 마도 아니 지게 지기 약쇼레스 인지미티 장고레세디 곧 뒤순고 말아 지난데 디나지바로도 아주 지속이 benedict lobdo 보고 집에네 파마다 예연주 그런기 그런을 누가 가려야도 그런 가를 자해게 되버체도 그런 디자베도 그런을 가리 줍투고 봐데 하고 하시는 되는게 있지는 가실이야 보하실 제모를 배 도나 친구에게 이번에 제모 약고 차이는데 제모도做자해 라베나 아지게 천리기 돈에 그런 돈아 침부여봐도 천리기 돈에야 지 뉴바 튼투여봐 지 여봐이네 델리아 천리기 돈에 로저데야다 야 멤비 로저데 디는 진짜 랍레기인다 파미네 그 어디 로저 디 약쇼레 디 장고레서 인지미지 우주 잡제 마제바제 그런 게 로정 지금 부 그런 게 뉴바다 그런 거 뉴바다 델레 되시는 거 로저데야디 용거로 와다오네 아직 루마카시에 나라 아직 데네기 파마다 데네가 어디 약쇼를 그런 인지미지 디 장고레 멤버 장고르마도 디 용고 말해서 디 약고요 디 맞아네 그런 자오이는 지금 말하려는 마직 파마다 데네기 해서 깔아 땅에도 부가실디 자의 그런 돈이 듬바 메디가 안지 뉴바시라 메디데 데네 강아체다 안지 가슴질 로죠 유네 맞아 지게 샤샤다 안지 데네기 뇌쇼 몽부에데 데네 라시자야다 데네 네수 용고로 와다 제자디 가르스는 미니 랍장 지타디 부 그런 그 뉴바다 뇌바다 튠비기 마도바지 콜 뇌바메바다 콜 뉴바다 미딘바지 시야데 아니 디 엔다가 제가 콜이야 팬예철은 뇌바 용고로 봐 지산당은 지소나를 랍장 지타 제다디 나신 네 사이기 최기 냠데 세미토네 디기주비아다 동아세 냠네 제 림바디야 다 조타로 찍바로 자기도 와
So, and having an understanding then of the breadth of different dispositions amongst beings, whilst we may then present to others in conversation to others that the attainment of Buddhahood is the supreme goal, and to achieve that, there's nothing better than that, and that would be factually correct. But what would be a mistake would be thereby to insist that others should strive for that goal, that they should ensure that their motivation is to become a Buddha. Because whilst that is the supreme goal, and it is correct to say that it is so, it's not necessarily skillful to insist that someone should strive for Buddhahood. Rather, the individual, in conjunction with their teacher, should identify where for now their disposition leads them and strive with sincerity for that goal. Because if striving for sincerity for a particular goal, one is much more likely to achieve it, or achieve it with greater ease. As parents, you'll know, you'll probably have taken a similar approach with your own children. You would have looked where their interest is, where their skill is, and then guided them to follow a career that matches their interests as well as their skills. So some young people are very athletic, so it makes sense for them to follow a path of becoming a professional athlete. Others have a great interest and aptitude for science, and then to follow a career in the field of science. So here, parents and teachers, as well as the child, should look at what their skill and their interest is and guide in accordance with that. This isn't the case, though, in all cultures. There are some cultures where the parents decide what their child will do, and their child is expected to obey and follow and do as they are told. And this isn't always the most skillful approach. Parents on their own may make a wrong decision for their child. Their child may push back, there may be conflicts, the child may even get so upset that they take their own life. So a far more skillful approach, and certainly the approach of the Dharma, that whilst one should present the supreme goal as being Buddhahood, doesn't mean that should be the destination, the desired goal of every person.
아니네. 어두스체 네네인자다. 안다데네. 델야 니발라스 니세다디 가로소데 김제 타바친 비결 다디들 람림 가소 체디 나오기부 중요한 람림 바다 진다디네 타바친 비결 람려야 바치고의 김제지 송도하다 김제외 당고 바오스 안당보들라 다니 가르스네 태슈는 주비고니 자주주도 셈게바 데인데스 데게바나 아니 주주레사 장주 semje gyurna kiji ki koyu zunra tenpe nyamda nam deshe se ki deshe nam ki se je juesha shin she sungpa tar 장주 semba shibi ming topde din de techin bar chu las de nyamna techin be semne temper yuwa yuri chirosa.
Then continuing in the text, so where we are is we're looking at the reason for the graduated guidance from the perspective of the three types of persons. We've looked now at the first outline, the purpose of such guidance. Now we come to the second, and the reason for such graduated or sequential guidance, which itself has two parts, the actual reason and the purpose. So looking at the first then, the actual reason. The gateway for entering the Mahayana is to generate bodhicitta, the mind directed towards supreme enlightenment. Once it has arisen in the mind stream, according to engaging the bodhisattva way, the instant they give rise to bodhicitta, the wretched, bound in the prison of cyclic existence, are declared children of the Sugatas.
나 디네게 당한주기 태화친 주비고 고스 당한주 장주 semba 다고 장주 semba레 말에서 태화친 고 태화친배 강사레 말에서 해딩한주 지 고로 주비고 고데 가르스는 장주 sem레 장주 쇼도 sem게 받레스 제산당한주 강번날 주여를 담보 권한이야 주고로와 디자디 나신다 태화친배 강사 차발라 주비고 고데 가르스는 장주 sem레 가서 장주 sem디 귤에 기회나 고 강사를 태화친배 차르고 그래 장주쌤 길에 끼면은 태바침에 가서 제거 말에 디네자 태진을 주비고 서 태바침비 야 차에 고디 가르스는 고나신디다 장주쇼도 쌤게 말해 제가 장주스의 쌤게 봐이나 안 태바침에 가서 제거 가서 디길에 장주쌤 유에나 다 태바침에 가서래 장주쌤 매나 가서디 태바침에 가서 말해서 가서디 태바침에 인다 마이 받제 타주서기 시로데 제바제 시데 시디 안 가서
Looking at the first sentence, the gateway for entering the Mahayana is to generate bodhicitta, the mind directed towards supreme enlightenment. Whether one is suitable to be called a Mahayanist is dependent on the presence of uncontrived bodhicitta. If one has generated uncontrived bodhicitta, one has generated the paths of the Mahayana within, and therefore suitable to be called a Mahayanist. If one has not yet generated uncontrived bodhicitta, one cannot yet call oneself a Mahayanist, because one has not yet generated the paths, the mental paths of the Mahayana within.
장주 semgye gyuna geji ge koyu zondre dambe ge nyamda nam deshe nam ge se she juesha shingas zanda ganjele 장주 semdi nyamnen je 장주 semgye le geba ina gebe ge geji daharane ane deliane bene de tabachimbe gansa rese ko 장주 sembari esada ondusine mingdi togore mingdi dusine dagores ande nege 장주 sembe se esada yanjige 데네게 냠는 제발에 데네 안 거스오래 동반이 또비 원숨도 통람세데 파비고 와도네 제주센바 계외세세 파바차세 계세 파바세데 운두스의 명디 토고래 제 제주센베 제주센데 계비 계지 다라네 강사들 제주센바스 명토고래 운두스의 태고침베 강사 차고래 야란디 냠술렘발에 데네 안 동반이 원숨도 또바이네 아니 계외세 제주센바 파바 계세 파바세데
Tsongkhapa then continues, once it has arisen in the mind stream, and then he quotes from Shantideva's entering the bodhisattva way, the instant they give rise to bodhicitta, the wretched bound in the prison of cyclic existence are declared children of the Sagatas. So here Lama Tsongkhapa is presenting a textual quotation supporting what he's written here, which is that in the very moment that bodhicitta arises within in an uncontrived manner, then one has attained a path of the Mahayana within, and one is suitable to be called a Mahayanist because one is now a bodhisattva. So that very moment From the very moment that bodhicitta arises in an uncontrived manner, one is suitable to be called a bodhisattva. And as one develops one's skill and capacity within, and eventually comes to realize emptiness directly too, then one becomes an Arya being, and not just an Arya being, but an Arya bodhisattva.
and ko lui di ko ko tian la ne che ko du nga nyong de de ne ki ko ba chi re de ina ko chang shi sim gyu le ge ba za ko chang shi sim ba cha ko re se che ko re se ni da chang shi sim ba ge se pa pa cha ba na xin chang shi sim ba pa pa yin ji min ji chang shi sim ba pa pa yin ko ma ro chang shi sim ba ko wa le ne de ge chang shi sim ba se de ko du nga le zhe wa jing ko ma ko du nga nyong mo ba jing ko ma je se chang shi sim ba se de ko du nga na pa ne che du nga nyong de ga sa xin bei ne or jamni jo kom janjusem gyula gigoyna ko janjusem ba chasa res janjusem ba je jesam kowe zune dembi nyamda nam se dunga nyon de de simbe ne ya janjusem gyula gigoyna dele janjusem ba se de ming togo re ko tyaba chimbe gasa chego re jere.
When bodhicitta is generated within, that practitioner is still going to be an ordinary being. So there will still be someone who has taken rebirth due to karma and afflictions. Their body will still be a true suffering. But they now have generated the paths of the Mahayana within. They are now a bodhisattva. So this is then the meaning of the second line in the quotation, the wretched bound in the prison of cyclic existence. So this practitioner is now a bodhisattva, but they are still an ordinary being, but yet, because of the quality of their great love and their great compassion, they now are a bodhisattva. And they will now can continue to strive and develop and eventually will become an Arya bodhisattva and gain freedom from cyclic existence, from uncontrolled rebirth due to karma and afflictions. But for now, they are still an ordinary samsaric being. But they have a quality within which is quite extraordinary, and that is this mind of bodhicitta. And therefore, they are a Mahayanist, they are a bodhisattva.
Andi dade janju sim ge phayin ro sung go ro janju sim ji san janju sim ye phayin din sio res janju sim gyu le ge ba na ge bi ge ji da ra la ko janju sim ba se de mi to go res ji san da janju sim ma ge na mi ma to janju sim ge no ko janju sim ba se mi to ba na ta sim be ji de zui ba dine yin za da cha je yu su gyu ba re se cha sang ge ji ma che go pu ya da cha je yu su gyu ba cha go re ji be mi di ko wa ba da dung a nyo de ge be ji dine ji pa da ne gyu bo ru xin be na ko yu la janju sim ge yu na dine ko janju sim ba na ta ba chen ba se ya da an ji ge cha je yu su gyu ba che bo pu yu su yu cha go re ji da janju sim ge pa yin din xiong go re se pa yin ru sung go ro de.
This verse is within the context of enumerating some of the many benefits of this remarkable mind that is bodhicitta, in that even an ordinary being who takes rebirth still without any freedom, such an ordinary being still can become a bodhisattva, a remarkable being. And such a being becoming a bodhisattva becomes an object of veneration by others. And so whilst they are far from having attained freedom themselves from the sufferings of samsara, they become someone worthy of veneration and respect from others because of this outstanding quality they have developed within.
내가 janju semba 시비 민 톱네 딘데 타바 쳔버 취라 지나 janju sem gyule gyade del야 janju semba 민 따고 janju semba 민톱 데네 가사데 타바 쳔버 차교를 타바 쳔버 취바레선 타바 쳔보다 진 차교를 해서로 janju semba 민 톱고레스 janju sem gyade ko janju semba 민 따고 와 지나 데네서 거 타바 쳔버 가사는 취바레다
And Lama Tsongkhapa comments on this verse. A person who has gained the title Bodhisattva is admitted to the ranks of Mahayana beings. So here, having generated uncontrived bodhicitta, they now are counted amongst the Mahayanists. Then Lama Tsongkhapa continues, if their bodhicitta deteriorates, they depart from the Mahayana. So this then makes the point that bodhicitta is both the entry to the Mahayana, but it is the potential exit as well. That if one loses one's bodhicitta, one can no longer be counted amongst Mahayanists.
톱차네 남사 톱차와 되네 거기디나 대전에서 많이 바차야기 된자 전에서 차야다 태버지 뭐 차야도 요 말에서 그래서는 전주쌤들이 냠송바데 미아바차로 디만 된 비루고 레지래.
Hearing then about the great benefits of bodhicitta, one gives rise to the wish to strive and cultivate it within so as to enter into the paths of the Mahayana. But one should also be very clear that when bodhicitta is generated and one becomes a bodhisattva, this precious attainment is to be guarded, is to be protected, to ensure that it doesn't decline, because if one loses one's bodhicitta, one loses what one has attained and is no longer counted amongst bodhisattvas, no longer counted amongst Mahayanists. So therefore one should strive to cultivate it, and having attained it, guard it, protect it well, and strengthen it further.
근데 전주sem바 냠야데 가르스 냠고라스네 다 전주sem바 소람 중원에 가서 냠바 용고를 다 소람 내 중원이야 제도 징차선 되는 냠바요 말에 그래서 전주sem데 제 가시를 전주sem 기차나야 냠바도 용고라스 디 전주sem바 소람 중원에 가서 용고라스 진짜 전주sem 냠여도 가르쳐서네 냠세데 가르스 냠고라스 어당에 셈제 탐지기 된지 투사 말에 셈비게 다셈비 코로나야 전주sem 냠내제 코로나 강아 기인 강아 전부 채도 디기 기에서 어당에 전주 샘제 탐지기 된지 투사 말에 선배 삼로도 기여도 되네 곧 되네게 삼로 코로나도 되네 바다 네 샘제 탐지기 된지 투사 말 지금에 선배 삼로도 전주습도 냠도 거래.
So how is it that this precious mind of bodhicitta can degenerate? Well, when a bodhisattva develops uncontrived bodhicitta, they enter into the first of the bodhisattva paths, the path of accumulation. And the path of accumulation has 3 levels, the small, middle, and great. So newly generating bodhicitta, they enter into the small level of the path of accumulation. And it's here and here alone where this new bodhisattva needs to can potentially lose their bodhicitta. So whilst losing bodhicitta is uncommon because of the great determination required to achieve it, it is nevertheless possible. So therefore, the new bodhisattva on the small level of the path of accumulation need to guard their bodhicitta. And they guard their bodhicitta by guarding their mind from thinking this goal of full and complete enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. This actually is quite difficult. It's far away, it requires extensive effort, and sentient beings, many of them are quite difficult, and therefore interacting with them, trying to help them is difficult. And for me it is too difficult. And that final thought may lead to their giving up on sentient beings and their bodhicitta degenerating. So on this first level of the path of accumulation, they need to guard their bodhicitta and strengthen it further.
누구 파기에 충충디가 그래야 삽섭시부제 오르와마다 되었지 투선 차송되고 견쇼오르와 걸매와 차로 그래서 누구 기리가로 충충디가 그래야서 삽섭제라제 바송교제 바직도 되냐 고로 첨부 차선 되는 거 제가 님이 지기 주말로다 가르쳐베는 미버도 알아봐 차 가르쳐베는 제라자 견 그래 지 견줘야야 진행아 중화로 저장한 저 돈돌 마서 누구 충충급이야 삽섭진디 다도 지고로와 니나시야도 부구로 비시네 부구 충충급을 맞아급이야 직밤에 시우 사와자지마데 콜이야 되스견존에 시에 냐아치 뭐로와 다시 아침 부차선 버지 로 중이 좀 주실래 내가 가능한 좀 줄래는 시라게 지게 냐아 중화 책으로 어디 나시 당한 저 전유선 당보 끼네 되네게 지게 야게 되어야 징디 말에 빠라 들려야 지게 냐매게 냐아
Gardeners will know. We'll try again. So gardeners will know that when a freshly planted plant first sprouts, it is very vulnerable, especially to the climate or to animals, and therefore needs to be protected. But when it grows and becomes strong, then it's able to withstand bad weather and so forth. And likewise, as parents, you know, when your child is, particularly when it's an infant, but in fact for several years, is very vulnerable and needs to be the child needs to be well protected, because harm can come so easily. And so too then, with this precious mind of bodhicitta, it too needs to be guarded when it's new and vulnerable.
And misigi sungupjia da
the new bodhisattva is immediately on the generation of uncontrived bodhicitta, is embraced by and closely cared for by the Buddhas to ensure that this remarkable precious mind within develops further and does not decline.
Geshe Thubten Rabten Dorje tusa mare samje dushe samdai dine janju sem nyam rode anda garchagre lamna ko lam nyamgyo mare kowe dungal tuen tarba topduge sambade nyamgyo mare di nyame mare ko ti che san nyame mere me banzada ko 안 가르쳐고 그래서 야는 년뒤에 차로 야는 랑결 마차로 그 람 냠고 말도 그 딘디 마지 마 표시 년뒤를 마차로 년뒤 차로 그래 제가 다디 년뒤에 람 냠는지 데리고 땅하나 또 그sem자 탐지기 된지 두자마 이내 땅하랑 고유 동안을 저시 타고 타고 선배 삼로 게임 거봐 제자다 디네게 삼제다 나랑 당보 고유 동안을 타고 톱된 나랑 강아 세선이 되는 게 잔다로 지게세 삼로 리고로 봐 제자 디네 자고 람 janjusem nyam yode tawa chimbe gasa lam nyam bare mato lam nyam yo mare anda manyam ba inda ko gar nyam ne jigesin nyande ge lam nyam ne jeru ko 해서 그 nyande dini ko nyande ta chimbe to to ko 해서 jela.
However, should this new bodhisattva be overcome by the thought that this is too difficult for me, striving to become a Buddha is too much for me, helping these difficult and challenging beings is too much for me, and they lose their bodhicitta, it's almost certain that they will, whilst their bodhicitta is lost, it will be replaced by a determination for their own individual liberation. Because to have come to this point where they are a bodhisattva, they would have reflected deeply on the faults of samsara and given rise to the determination for freedom. But now, having lost their bodhicitta, it's highly probable they will have a determination to achieve their own individual liberation. And such a practitioner is also, as we heard of this possibility last night, is likely to have the determination, I will attain my own individual liberation. Thereafter, I will strive to become a Buddha and enter then the paths of the Mahayana and work for others. But before I work for others, I need to gain freedom myself. So in this way, such a practitioner, when their bodhicitta degenerates, they lose their Mahayana path of accumulation, but they will still stay on a path of accumulation, but that be on the path of accumulation of a hira or solitary realizer. So they no longer have bodhicitta, and therefore no longer have the path of a bodhisattva within. But because they have almost certainly replaced their bodhicitta with a determination for individual liberation, they will have a path of a practitioner striving for their own individual liberation, a hira or solitary realizer.
ne semde godumane bede kiyekolas ndeke balani mundu semde gibi payun gomnes payun lo zhuo shuche pewa shidang yanla dunba gyabzhuo dan jeba la gobar labdu dan juju le songsu osa.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa continues. This being so, those who wish to enter the Mahayana must exert themselves in many ways to generate that mind. However, to generate it, they first need to meditate on the benefits of generating that mind so that delight in those will increase and do the seven-limb practice together with going for refuge. This is what is taught in Shantideva's Compendium of Trainings and in his Entering the Bodhisattva Way.
제사당은 저기 태바 침비게 취 냠는 제바 되바 요바이 나서 태신은 juk 되바 남기니 태바 침비 취 냠는 지긴 제제 태바 침비 취 냠는 되바 요바 남기네 당보 가르쳐 버서네 셈기에 되고 두만에 배 고두만에 배디 끼고 제사다 저기 장수 셈데 난 지금 냠는 제약이 두스전에 고두만에서 냠는 제 탑을 rimba mangbu thone tapna so tapra maragi thone nyamlen jeje and bezuje nyamlen je nene janjusim de gyde ki hogores jisan janjusim ge bala dangbo nyele ya janjusim gi chu thobege tapla mangbu yode kone and bezuje hogores nene bezuje jen janjusim de ki hogores de ki hogores ere janjusim gi hoba ismare de janjusim ge kuma tap duma mangbo samdang denegi nyamlen chine nyamlen rimba de ge hogores janjusim tongwe janjusim gi panyön tongwe panyön de ge ge hogor tongwe yende de ge hogores.
So therefore, those who have the wish to cultivate, to enter the paths of the Mahayana themselves, they need to strive by various means to cultivate bodhicitta. They need to exert themselves in various ways or in various means to achieve or generate bodhicitta within. Because as we've seen, the entry into the Mahayana is uncontrived bodhicitta. So this is what one must strive for if one wants to become a Mahayanist, a bodhisattva.
Ore, se janjusim kiyokola se janjusim koranrache, kiyokola semdi janjusemdi gebala godume janjusembi nyamlenche godumanesam dumchen mangbo samde tabla mangbo samda bezu jeje and dus bezu che bala dene 장시스미 기호를 했을 때 기호를 했을 때 장시스 코로나 샹리우도 장시스 코로나 지사 장시스 기에 레라우진 기토요 말레스 지단디 마긴예래야 장시스 기에 탑람 드라마로 고두마선 탑람 망부 베즈제제 안냠는 제발에 되네 아니 장시스 기호를 했을 기호를 하세.
So there are these various components in order to generate bodhicitta. Firstly, one needs to make extensive effort over a considerable period of time. Moreover, one needs to do so through various means, and those various means will include using reasoning, using one's own intelligence, thinking for oneself. This is the way by which one comes to generate bodhicitta. It shouldn't be seen, the generation of bodhicitta shouldn't be seen as something that's easy to do. Rather, to recognize that it is a remarkable attainment. And therefore, to attain something like that, one needs to make extensive effort over a protracted period by various means. In other words, utilizing a lot of reasoning and various techniques in order to generate bodhicitta.
지사다 전주심계에 탑람 망고 섬당 거스데 당하는 중에는 민 주반하게 전주심계 발라 균제 맹아 균유권 섬다제 네 전주심 냠는 지다다 다샤냠지 요건에 냠는 지다시 송고라 대한도 디나도 소야디 균제 람림나라 소야디 균제 맹아 균 냠술림베드네 전주심계 송고라와 주주나 소야디 다샤냠지기도 하는 전주심규에 개바도 송고라와 지사디네 자다 안데딘 마저 전주심계라 탑고 두만에 손도 지사다 당보람 다 전주심 냠는 제발라 균에 맹야 균이 삼다이도 안데 심제 담제 안 땅용 고미야 안 심제 담제 안지게 랑게 마르제 뇽와 고미야 안 심제 담제라 안데 진 첨보 임바 고미야 안 심제 담리야 안 진소 고미야 디네 잠바 고미야 디네 니죠 고미야 디네 하산 남다 고미야 제사 디네 기림바 곰제 디네 장시심 규례 기억으로 와도 지단 고두마세데 디소지데 디나레드누 데레 고두마시 도스치나 가지고 장시심 람림나 소야데 균리의 맹아 뒤 맹아 죽곰제네 제보 아니 장시심 개발라 디니엘의 규죽도 공부를 제사 고두마세데 고미야게 냠내지 망부치로 와되는 곰 기억으로
To generate bodhicitta, there are many means, particularly refers to the two techniques that are presented. The one is the sevenfold cause and effect method, and the other, which is particularly emphasized in Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva's way of life, is that of equalizing and exchanging self with others. So these are the primary means by which one generates bodhicitta. The sevenfold cause and effect method actually starts with a level before that of developing equanimity or impartiality, seeing all beings as equal in value. Thereafter, one starts with the training of recognizing the close and intimate relationship we have with all beings, that of mother and child, reflecting on the kindness, therefore, that each being in the role of mother has shown us, developing a determination to repay that kindness. And when that independence on this determination to repay the kindness, one cultivates love and compassion. And thereafter, the wholehearted resolve, where one develops the determination or takes responsibility for others, for their welfare, for ensuring they achieve lasting happiness. So these are the steps of the sevenfold cause and effect method by which one generates bodhicitta.
that simja tamje dewa den simja tamje dongal jaduge samba ya woni ji kewala ya dangbo ne simjen tamje le ya samdan le ya kewala dangbo sosugi den na samdan go ji son soso rang koyo dongal le tago du senbege samlo yakbo ji kemado bana ne xian le ya samdan ne xian simja tamje koyo dongal le jogo sembe samlo di buida ko ji yong tu ma le ji san di yakbo yong le nie le ya soso koyo dongal le joje 저거 코에 동안들 탈고도 선배 탈도 삼바지 네네 야고시키 고고래 디 장도 치고 그래서 지산 디네자 대바치 묘취 냠는 제니라 기우증다 투무라 미는 바 장고에 김선디다 지세 그래서 소수익이 소소 코위에 둥알에 카랑나송의 둥알 코위에 둥알에 탈제 탈마탄 탈면도 코위에 둥알 탈고도 선배 코위에 둥알 꽤 마통바나 소소 코위에 둥알에 탈되게 삼반 남바다 버기 두고 말했어. 소소라랑 코위에 둥알 삼반 남바다 버기 마통나 소소에 되니게 냠뇨 메디 안시엔 섬제래 미제 설섬제는 코위에 둥알을 줘고도 선배 삼로데 야포실이 두고 말했어. 제가 섬제 탐제래 삼다 섬제 코위에 둥알을 줘고도 선배게 삼로직 야보치 닝제 야보치 레발라 소수용 나로 소소야 코유 둥을 맞는데 타벼 말에 세비게티 코유 捲 통에 징해바 띵네 코알이야 셴발로시 되네 타고 거서 베삼바 디 소소하라 고고래 해제래 되네 자다 기부진다 투모에 삼바 장고바디 임자로 디샤고래
The generation of bodhicitta involves recognizing our close and interdependent relationship with others in order to develop a tender, loving attitude towards all. This then gets developed to the point where one wants to help others, to repay the kindness they've shown, to help them achieve the happiness that beings long for. One thinks to oneself, what is it that beings really want? What is the kind of happiness they want? And that is happiness freed from suffering and problems. A happiness where the mind is always at peace and the body too never suffers. So this is where one develops actual love and compassion for others, wanting them, the mind of love, wanting them to experience only happiness, and the mind of compassion, wanting them to be free of suffering and its causes. But to be able to genuinely develop love and compassion for others, one needs to understand why they are suffering and give rise to a determination for each being to be freed from those causes. Because the mind of the altruistic mind, or the mind of wholehearted resolve, is where one takes responsibility to guide others to gain freedom from the causes of suffering, and to guide others to cultivate the causes for lasting happiness. But for that mind of wholehearted resolve to be of sufficient strength, that one puts aside everything else and rather focuses on helping others, one first has to have recognized deeply one's own situation. In other words, before one can develop compassion for others, one has to develop compassion for oneself. Because compassion is the wish for freedom from suffering, the wish to never suffer. So before one can have this thought towards all sentient beings, no matter what relationship one has with them, to be freed of suffering, one has to have that wish for this sentient being, for oneself. So it's for this reason that prior to engaging in the trainings, to focusing on the trainings of the practitioner of great capacity, one has to have trained successfully in the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. Because it's the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity are where one looks at one's own situation, recognizing the breadth of suffering that one experiences, both the coarse and subtle levels, and the causes of that suffering, whereby one comes to recognize that as long as one accumulates the causes of suffering, one will remain bound in these suffering realms of samsara. And as long as one is bound within samsara, no lasting happiness can be achieved. The only way one can achieve lasting happiness is to be freed or liberated from samsara. And to do that, one has to eradicate the causes that keep one bound in samsara. And recognizing those causes, one gives rise to definite emergence, the determination to emerge from these suffering realms of samsara. So this training is the training of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and it's done in relation to oneself. This is the indispensable prerequisite to being able to become an actual Mahayanist, to generate sincere love and compassion for others, no matter who they are, whether they're someone one has no relationship with, whether they're someone who has a poor relationship towards you, whomever they are, to have genuine love and compassion for them, one first has to have developed self-compassion, self-love, and thereby given rise to the mind of definite emergence.
So gyune na manyo jo so na ze gyune dunga manyo nyo manyo so na manyo mi chi yorwa de mi digi mi janda jo so na de labne na ze yore se kanga yore se be samlo chingur ma do ene dizigi ko kanga ge chowa de nyoa di yo mare da namyu so so rang ge so na ze nye ma nya na nyonghan ji gansa yorwa digi mi janda so na gi du se ko yo de ko na so na ya ge kanga de ko nyamyo de nye ma nyo sa Korea 초아디 코소 나고르세베 sometimes that dunga koron nyo de ba dina 신지 콜 용거레세베 ko dunga nyo타디 콜리아 베직 아카소르 세버서버디 마 하고 세부 슈지 차거로 봐 소균에 나 만나 가자디 코소 나기전 나즈 요레세베 삼로 권이가 나즈 요레세베 삼로 찍버레데 소나 용한 디기 초월지당 니마서 나마뇨데기 마뇨데기 코서 나걸 하고 소원이 뱃 그런 숙체주 개발시 우는 거로 봐. 어디 나시 나 저기 소수기 코의 동안 균 파다 검제 소수 검제 소수야 디니기 즉 오지 균 시고 통한 디기다 샘쟁이 샘제 샤나 삼다도 강아 통해도 미시기다 소설 강아디네 용거 바디 즉 디미시 콜이야 다 강아디네 시도서 베니지 라와디기 레토야 준 거로 봐. 다 소설리에 디니게 강아 삼주르 제마당한 디게 닝제사지마도 디지기 안줄이야 즉 초월을 지 레토야 준 거 말어 진짜 닝제리 부다보지 레토야 가고 차고 그래 제대로 인자다 저기 가리네 소로지 나 차와는 소수기 냠뇨 여바는 시행치 소 나고레스 베강아디 오다디 강아디는 쇼레 샘벨 람상 코로레 제인제 코 강아세 강아디 세부 휴지 하고 도야 책으로 비로지 하베나
So by means of illustration, if you meet someone and they say, "Oh, I've got terrible toothache," immediately you have an emotional response because you know what it's like to have terrible toothache. Whereas if you've never had toothache, you may have some empathy for this person, but your response is very different because you haven't experienced it. And other illnesses that you have experienced in this life, if you meet someone who suffers from that, immediately your response to them is very different than before you yourself had such an experience. So in the same way, if you have reflected well on suffering and thereafter on the causes of suffering, understanding with vivid clarity why I remain bound in these suffering realms, then when you meet others, and you see how they're reacting, you'll immediately and with ease, compassion will arise because you'll understand what is afflicting them. You'll see how they keep repeatedly making the same mistakes. Despite yearning for happiness, they keep destroying their own happiness. Despite yearning to be freed of suffering, they keep creating causes for suffering. Seeing this, deep compassion for them will naturally arise. But that only comes about in dependence on previously having examined your own mind very well and understood the role the afflictions play for yourself.
Dene yung do ang sibin ro sa na sibin pe ka cho ro jo ro dene ge sibin de ka cho de nye ma sa jong de ka cho tong wei na sa nyong wei na zhuo ji nyong wei na ka cho shu zhuo nyong sa ro wa chi su sibin de tong wei de ne an ka na ma ji nye man ji cho wa de ba ji nyong ji de ma ji ka na ma ju le de ka ro chi ko sibin sa go ma de ne tong wei de o ti zhuo de de ne xi yo le sem be sam da ka na ma ji ju le de ka ro chi da dine sibin de do de nyong so dine sibin de ka cho yo le sa ma to disi de cho ji le min do ji na dine za ko so so gi nyam yong si ge yo da mix gi da cho le de de da ji ko pan do jun go ro da ha go ya ji ji sa de 디나지 제도하다 거친 소수기다 고유 동안 교연 삼다파 냠냠용 마선다 고유 동안 되게 파지 하고요도 내가 템분이요도 대신에 삼다베네 고유 동안 세딜이야 셈슈슈체기야다 디기도에 셈슈슈체기야 소소야 디디지라 강아지 되니게 냠냠에도 샹내기야 돼 총아마도 용도 매로와.
Likewise, if you've traveled somewhere where the food is very hot and spicy, and you've been struck just by how hot and uncomfortable it is to eat some of this food, and then gained some experience of what to do with it, perhaps to eat some yogurt, and to try and deal with the fire within, then when you later encounter someone else eating chili for the first time, and their face goes red and their eyes tear up, not only do you know what to do, but you want to help. So you have both knowledge based on your experience, and your compassion easily arises. So too, when you've understood how your own mind works, and how our own mind can be our greatest enemy and cause us so much pain, but you've also gained skill in how to deal with your own mind, then when you see others acting in foolish ways, you immediately will have a response of compassion. And not just a placid response of compassion, a determination to help will arise.
안다 거기 등에 이게 약보 통해야 돼. 나 거기 등에 쪼어디 가르세네. 아 저기 풍보디 되다. 다 동화랭아 저 동화 유에 동화 잡아두지 동화 세치셔로 숨여로와. 동화데 가저기 동화 찌째 레라 통토거로와. 근데 다 유에 동화 가서 유에 동화다 잡아두지 동화 세야 돼. 아 저기 가서는 밀하다 미 아주 가르치고서는 아 저기 체디기 디기디 대화디 아주 돈돈이 거와 디 견통고 마디 연대레디 약고를 디 고고라서는 가지고 디 주에게 돈달이 아주 깨네 마시 봐도 디 장장 돈달이 nenchiki tukorwa, chawa dekali kore, di tondala tubukia kore, di tondala maasho korwa, chesan sosuki lule digi yoyada, ane sem nekapi kiwu yoyadi, tse digi di. Chesan tse digi di nga zuki chwe na shedo, yi gyure dunga rese, chesan gyure dunga rese. Kasan ko dewa re de, tembu yo ma re, lamsang gyure je, di che lamsang kanga le yungu re, chesan di dewa tembu di yo ma rese. Di, chesan di nga zule, di tsam yu chokshe chena digi yo ma rese. 제자들 뒤에 강아세 두고 말이지. 제가 니교 농고 거래. 디. 아니 가지고 류디. 당아서 딱보게 류디 딱보게 그러와. 칼라제야다, 추제야다, 도로야다, 쥐야다. 요직직 빠진 류디 시부 딱보게 그러와. 제가 니가 저 눈눈이 걸어와다. 배가 배 자시고 휴지 걸어와. 제가 니교 임바 통고 거래. 제가 니가 저 넣어야 배깔리 하고 차고. 제가 가지고 동아의 유유 동아세야 되다. 가지고 다 류디 교인 바 통하게 갈래가보죠. 제자디 캬바도 주도. 나중에 류기 동아디 레다 녀모 오미 중화들이 제자디 캬바세디 냐와바다 이다다 든조다 나자 미다 라다 수다 수메세 하가와 가와 제베나 레다 녀모 오미 풍보디다 동아 차려래. 제가 띵부메데 내가 뜻 되기요나 제일 약간을 되게 미직 유아 좋다겠지. 제자다 니네게 대화되기 간주 지고 말했어. 다 가르고서 간주 주어 균에 말도 대화네 대화 땡이 대화를 고고로 봐. 내가 톱자 뒤로 봐. 제자다 니네자 디 동아 임바 균 통고 그래. 디균 통야려야 안데 됐을까래 하고 봐. 제자 니네자 니 통야려 녀려 양아주 가르장 거라선다 로장에 내가 동아디 통야 레라 완자 되는 수볼라나서 다야다. 안제네 네한다서 봐다. 되는 삼다도 먼저 삼다도 미다 든로 삼다वे나 든로야 강아망아 여바딩 가지고 어서 통투거로 받아 든로기 대디네게다 이다다 냐와세 땡아서 통투거 디네디네 나주여 강아 여러서 시행도 제사 디네에서는 고유 동아래 가서 간송의 동아들 타고 쓰지 간송의 동아들 통해래 나와라 지산다 간송의 동아래 타고 쓰베 디삼로도 파게 간송의 동아들이 파게디 that 레라 용거 제사다 간송의 동아래 교연다 통하지 아주가 하다 밀려 연된 따들이 교연샤 통고 말에 이제 교연 따투고 말에 만소다 냐와다 든로다 이다세도 만줄에 마와 지가 저 교연 통하래 레라요래 진짜 되네자 녀려야 디자지 지가 소면 동안 gyöndiki pa samda jeze dele targodu dele tarna tada migo towana da di dendele ya ane gangase ya tablam je yor digi jubege tablam duya yor be dan anson le dene yomar dundole yene yomar idala de so nyawa bale dene yomar so tada mile gene dele kontrole nganzo yene ya yore sede du samda je samda de 진짜 로고미아디 나보 가서면 동안 파 삼다 동아들 삼다 델레 타고 셈비 삼르게 야고지 기에데 다 델레 타지 원료 고방 토고 그래 세비 다 되니게 삼라 야고 장에도 니 야고 차서는 가서 동안 파징 괜디게 파 강아 삼 야고지 하고요도 되네 젤야 안 가서 코르웨 동아다 하라 미리게베네 강아드네 요레스 바시에 지시게 레라도 코 마시베네 코 하고 해야 레라 차도 디네자 기부 딩게 투모 람유 로장 바라 녀라 기부 충유게 람유리 로장 투모 람유리 로장 와데 녀라 바 로장 조에도 임전로 디차고다
This meditation then on suffering, that this is something that one needs to spend considerable time on, looking at the topic of suffering from a wide variety of perspectives. So this term translated as suffering we should understand as having a very broad meaning, from one end being a slight level of unease, feeling things aren't quite right up to the furthest extent of intense pain. Everything within that is referred to as suffering. We reflect on it from many different means. The easiest to recognize is the suffering of physical and mental pain. This is what all beings recognize as suffering and want to gain freedom from. So this we can start to recognize quite easily. But a subtler level, and the level that we need to recognize, is the suffering of transient happiness. Because what the suffering of transient happiness is what we understand as happiness. It's what humans and gods understand as happiness. And because this is what we believe to be happiness, and we have a yearning for happiness, we strive to achieve happiness. But the happiness we achieve is transient. It's temporary. It doesn't last. And therefore it never satisfies us. Every pleasure we've attained, we've lost. And then we yearn for more. We either yearn for that again, or we yearn for something better. We are never satisfied. Our mind, therefore, is always suffering in the way of unease. And moreover, because of this yearning for happiness, but not knowing what is actual happiness, lasting happiness, we strive for this transient happiness, thinking this is the best that can be achieved. And in order to achieve it, we very often create causes of further intense suffering. We may steal, we may kill, we certainly will take advantage of others, deceive others, all so that we can achieve happiness ourselves. And in this way we can understand that pursuing the suffering of transient happiness leads us to creating non-virtuous karma. But moreover, it also serves to consume our lives, because even for us now, as spiritual beings, as people who yearn to attain paths, to enter the paths of the Mahayana, our mind remains distracted by achieving the pleasures of this life. And this is what we hold as so important. And our mind is continuously thinking about the problems of this life and the pleasures of this life. And thereby, we are distracted from using our life well. So this is a further fault of not recognizing the suffering of transient happiness, because we continue to pursue transient happiness. The third type of suffering, when suffering is divided into three, is the all-pervasive suffering of conditionality. And that refers to our physical and our physical body, as well as our mind in general, the five aggregates. This is the very basis upon which we experience suffering. So this is the subtlest level of suffering to understand. Because it's through this understanding we recognize wherever we are reborn, we will still suffer as long as we have these appropriated aggregates. Whether we're born as a human or a God in any level of God, we will continue to suffer because we have these appropriated aggregates. It's when we recognize this level of suffering, we give rise to the determination to abandon these appropriated aggregates, this contaminated body, these contaminated minds. And as a motivation to engage in this meditation, we have a prior recognition that we all yearn for happiness. And the wish for happiness is what motivates everything we do, everything we say and everything we do, and all our thoughts. But we are deluded actually by what are the causes for happiness, because we don't really understand what is happiness. We have never really experienced happiness. All we've experienced is transient happiness, which in the prior meditation we came to reflect is actually suffering. Understanding this, then we come closer to developing this determination to gain freedom from our afflictions, because we recognize that our afflictions are what cause us to suffer. And therefore even the happiness we experience is so tainted that too is to be abandoned, and rather we should have our focus on achieving lasting, stable happiness. This presentation of suffering is the threefold presentation, and there are others, a sixfold and an eightfold. But these meditations are contained within the practices which are shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity. And these are reflected on in terms of the sufferings experienced by beings in the higher realms, the beings that are humans or gods. The place really we should start is with the trainings that are shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. This is where we should start, which is where one reflects on the suffering not of the higher realms, but of the lower realms. Looking at initially the suffering of animals, because animals we can directly see. And thereafter we look at the suffering of the other beings in the lower realms, those born as spirits or in the hells. So we start there because it's easiest to recognize. Starting, for example, with animals, how their intelligence is so limited. There's very little they can do about their situation. They can only endure. There's very little they can do to solve their problem. Then we go on to think about the sufferings of pretas and hell beings. So this is the starting point, and this is a practice that is shared with practitioners of initial capacity. And we meditate there extensively to the point where we give rise to the determination, my next life, I do not want to be born there. I have to once again attain a higher realm rebirth as a human or a god, and develop this determination to cultivate the causes to be reborn as a human or a god, and not in the lower realms. So the reason for starting here with reflecting on the suffering of the lower realms, these trainings shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, the reason for starting here is these are the sufferings which are easiest to see. Thereby, it's easiest to meditate on them and give rise to the result of that meditation, a deep and sincere determination to close the possibility to our being reborn there in our next life. And in engaging in these meditations which are easiest to do, we develop both our skill in meditation by gaining extensive experience of meditating. Also, and of great importance, we develop a strength of mind, a more focused mind, a mind more focused on virtue as opposed to non-virtue, a mind more focused on accumulating causes that lead to desired results. So this is how we start, by training in the practices shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, because it develops our skill in meditation, but in particular our mind becomes much more focused, less distracted, much more powerful, less weak and wishy-washy. This is why we start with the trainings shared with the practitioner of initial capacity.
Denegi da jibu nga sunga dunga la tarduke samba chanchi susuki la denegi ngondio gobang toku nga sunga la targudu sembe samla yakbu chikeyo de deni ba chanyo de deni nga kowe dunga chadala gyuen ba tongde kowe dunga la tarduke samba de yakbu chikeyo susuki soso la samdani soso tarduke samla yakbu chikeyo deni kiyo de tanga zu du samdang goro de ngarangi deni dung pe nga son samda de nga nyewal kiabana da mishenda ji na nasdang yo ba de samda we na 소수기 될 등하 디나 용거를 삼배네 될 타고 삼배 삼로 숙체리 거로와 딩아데 파기디 두가 용거를 삼배 삼로 메나 데네 숙체 보셔야 용거를 말 지나디 좋아든 저기 지마 저기 rumba pombo 침보데 거로 말로 말와 지잔다디 길지 도거스 당샤도 아니 샤샤 소수게 강아 치고 매와자 디지게 소화실리고 말와 다 소소랑 저거 지인배나 강아 같이게 사야도야 소를 년가 나야나 디니시도 디니스 셈리야 배치 천 초월 믹시지 소소 저거 시켜서 진짜 디나시 아주 가서 동아리도 두 삼다도 디네 삼다 같이 깨버나 디 동아 용고를 했으면 삼다 다 텔레데 배사 대타고 선배 삼로 숙침을 이거와 딜레네 디네 마삼다 나가 코와라 깨선다 디네 코와데 끼네 동아 까빠도면 딜레데 타고 선배 삼로 숙침을 이거와 두스 약보 장소는 디샬 삼다는 셰셈자들 동아리 저고도 선배다 말은 탑민도 선배기 인제 약보 레어도 디젤라네 가르쳐 걸었네 셈제 동아리 왜 탑람이야 베즈치엘 맞음 동아리 저고도 선배 삼로디 니만 장사 여여 버와다 지산데 디젤에 가르쳐서는 자주 셈제 탐제다 동아리 저고도 제자다 게 저고 선배게 닝도게 땅이 줘야야 나를 탑람 디디 고고로 세배다 가르고고에서는 최시의 신바 다 제수수의 계절을 마서는 건조 감담 뭐봐 하고 두바 건조리아 최게 디때나 판도 여봐 가르가르 때 여봐디 나리아 연된디서 고고스면 되네 파신 중에 냠는 자다 산조고마 토야기 다 산조고바데 탑약쇼를 시야 제사다 되네기 최대하게 건조 강화세야기 다 동안 세야단 디기 주에기 탑람 딜이야 베스시행으로 다데 장시샘 냠는 지요 데려야죠 제사 디네자 당아주기 장시샘 개발라 당보안에 잠니제다 잠니제라소바야고 기호레스 디 잠니제야고 경할라 소수기 동안 소수기를 삼제네 소수 동안에 개발에 강화된 중화데 동안 고유 동안들 타고 선배 삼로 약보 진ям용시 기호레스 디 개발라 녀네 아니 소수기 간송의 동안 삼다데 간송의 동안에 나텔리키네 강화된 중물을 선배 삼다도 제베네 간송 동안에 탈도 삼바 약보 기토바나 데네 소소 고유 동안에 삼 탈도 동안 삼다데 약보 기토 그래서 디 안 소수기 냠용디 파셈제 샹달라 카보지 미유디 대신 아주 소소로 삼다로 다 소소로 삼마다데 셈제 샹달라 삼다제 미유디 셈제 삼다 데네 고유 동안에 살도 탈도 삼바데 니제 약보 기기 그래서 디 기토바나 데네 나 고주 동화세계 탑람디 바제요 되다 산요고바 토고 산요고바 토발라 나 자주심 기하고도 바주르기 냠내 지고스메 삼리에데 된 자주심 기하도 용거래지 어두신다 니네기다 юм자로 디레도 하다
So I hope then it's clear why one needs to train in this particular sequence. We've looked at going from the need to generate bodhicitta right back then to the beginning, the need to train to engage in the training shared with practitioners of initial capacity in order to eventually generate bodhicitta. So, but we looked at it in the reverse order, now to look at it in the forward order, just to make sure it's clear. One starts first with looking at the suffering of the lower realms. And by meditating well on this, one develops both skill in meditation, being able to meditate, gain skill in how to meditate, using reasons and so forth. And as one gives rise to this determination, I don't want to suffer like that. I recognize the potential for me to fall into the lower realms in a future rebirth. I do not want that to happen. I have to accumulate the causes to ensure ongoing good rebirths. In dependence on that strength of mind, one then engages in the meditations on the sufferings of the higher realms of humans and gods. For example, the threefold suffering. Because then one has a focused mind, a stronger mind, and is thereby able to engage in subtler levels of meditation or subtler topics, meditation topics, coming to reflect then on the suffering of physical mental pain, but in particular the suffering of transient happiness, and thereafter the suffering of all pervasive conditioning. Then when one has reflected well on the sufferings of samsara, coming to recognize not only wherever I am born, as long as I am a samsaric being, I will suffer, but everything within samsara that I may strive for, it is contaminated, and therefore it cannot lead to lasting happiness. And one starts to give up on samsara, turn one's back on samsara, renounce samsara, give rise to a determination to emerge from samsara. Such a mind then, by now is very skilled in meditation and is very focused. One is no longer so deceived by the pleasures and delights of samsara, and thereby one's mind is much more focused on the Dharma. Then when one turns one's attention to the plight of others, it's very easy then to recognize that they are suffering for the same reasons that I am. And just like I want to gain freedom from suffering, so too do they. Then it becomes very easy to cultivate the Mahayana within, the paths of the Bodhisattva. If we take a very ordinary example from our world, wherever there is warfare, we tend to notice that the political leaders who initiate warfare, they themselves are not involved. Perhaps if they had to directly partake in battle, there would be far less warfare, because they would then know what it is like to experience such pain and misery. So likewise, by meditating first in relation to one's own situation, giving rise to the determination, I do not want to be born in the lower realms. I have to gain freedom from the sufferings of samsara and gain liberation. In this way, generating compassion towards oneself, in other words, generating the determination, I don't want to suffer. May I be free of suffering and its causes, and I will gain freedom from suffering. I will abandon the causes of my suffering. First, having reflected on one's own situation in this way, one can turn one's focus to others. And then it becomes very easy to appreciate why they are suffering, but they are actually no different from me in wanting to gain freedom from suffering. And again, independence on one's success in training in the practices shared with practitioners, first of initial and then intermediate capacity, one will have seen the process of spiritual development blossom within your own mind. Thereby you'll have confidence. I can spiritually develop. I've seen the change within. And I've seen this hasn't just happened, it's come because of my efforts, my skillful training. And therefore I know change is possible. And if it's possible for me, it is possible for others. So in this way, one is really ready to develop bodhicitta. One knows that one oneself can gain freedom. Therefore, so too can others. What they require is skilled guidance. And therefore, I need to become greatly skilled. The greater my knowledge, and the deeper the skill and transformation based on that knowledge, the more I have to help others with. Because I recognize there's a wide variety in terms of disposition and inclination amongst beings. So the broader my base of skill is, the broader the number of people I can help. So in this way, one's determination to engage in study of the Dharma and cultivation of the Dharma within becomes ever greater. Because one wants to be able to help those who are more inclined to the Theravada. One wants to help those who do not yet have any interest in liberation, but who have the potential to develop an interest to achieve the causes for good rebirth. So in all these ways, one is developing a deep strength of mind and a skill in meditation. But this comes about independent on training, first in the practices shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, and based on that, in the trainings shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. Then one has the skill and strength of mind to engage in the trainings of a practitioner of great capacity.
Deke balani sida janjisim ke balani deke balani ngundu sim gibi panyo gomne se gomgore jizada panyo gomne panyo le zhushu perwa shidang gogore jizada janjisim ke bala janjisim gi pa samdang janjisim ke ba panyo de yore janjisim gi panyo mango samdang gore panyo de samdang de da janjisim sa de gyule magene ji금 da tibe yakor tigene yakor esbi da selya 조슈표배 가우슈지 내내기 조슈표가지고 그래지래 지난자 전주쌤 개발라 딩원래야 안전주쌤기 오늘 쌤기비 판연이 봐서 쌤게 전주쌤 개발의 판연되는 요래 되는 요 라라 판여다 샹래 판바되는 용고래서다 판연이 망고디 요르면서 디나이 삼다 디네 삼 판연이 야고 삼다이도 되네디 다디 마기네 탑문디 토고도 쌤베게 다 쌤바 조슈치모디 용고래스 지난 디네기 토고 쌤베 조시침부 끼어디 디 토백이 된다려야 안에 가르가르 베스치고 디 베스치용으로 받아 디 토백이 되면 축체보지요 봐이나 네 되면 축체몰이야 봐도 디기 연대 통고 그래지래 디 연대 통나 디 되니기 되면 축체몰이 그래서 디 톱도기 전시sem네 톱도기 되면 축체몰이야 봐이나 안에 전시sem네 디 톱이 된다라 베스치기리 해서 중고도 와다 진짜 니네자 전당 원래야 전시sem기 파연 삼다야 오 삼다 파연디게 삼다야 오 삼다야 전시sem들이야 아다디뼈 야고 레샤 셈베게 야고 지나한데 마도는 탑민의 등이 토벌지기 셈베게 될이야 전시sem이야 빼지 가신 조시 디 토비하게 되냐기 두모 숙치모리게 그래서 디인자다 도시네 디지는 아니 전시sem 토야기 게 탑람을 배주시기에서 디엔자 대전시세 판에 삼다 전시세물이야 주슈표와지 로디 땅보 뜻상고래서
The Lama Tsongkhapa continues. However, to generate it, in other words, to generate bodhicitta, they first need to meditate on the benefits of generating that mind, so that the light in those benefits will increase. Lama Tsongkhapa then is referring now to a practitioner who has trained well in the training shared with a practitioner of initial and thereafter intermediate capacity. So with this foundation, this practitioner has a deep determination to gain freedom from suffering. And they've understood well the causes of suffering as well as how to gain freedom from suffering. Now, in order to give rise to actual bodhicitta, not only do they recognize the similarity between themselves and others, in that all want to achieve happiness and be freed of suffering, and all are suffering for the same reasons, to actually take this mind of empathy towards others, this understanding of their situation, and develop it into actual bodhicitta. The practitioner needs to engage in hearing and reflecting on the benefits of bodhicitta. And This is something that time and energy need to be placed into, because to the extent that one understands the benefits of something, a determination to attain that will arise. The deeper one recognizes the benefits of bodhicitta, the deeper one's determination will be to achieve it. And in this way, one will come to the point where one takes delight in pursuing the particular virtuous mind, in this case, bodhicitta. For any of these qualities, where one understands the benefits of it, and not just merely understands it intellectually, but has given rise to this yearning, I want to achieve that result myself, I want to experience those benefits, then one will take delight in the process. Therefore, engaging in the meditations, receiving the teachings, and so forth, becomes pleasurable, becomes easy.
Afghanistan erige mameti ye pa anji dendro de kabla ane mimadi gelya be jikta jik nganzo nyum de dugi seda bu te ta ya da anji nganyum di dugi sene ko namdu shokwa ga ya sa de de ye ji thaya mangbu do a desugi midi gelya samno kharyorsen ta lumba telya jikanga da yokra kanga shu je ba 다 되는 파도는 강아세 편이 빼야고 연구를 선배다 되네기 강아데 통어도 강아들라 탈도가 삼바 빼 맞아 삼모기네 다 피 약합신다 리리게 말은 피기데 지게 디기디 야고야기 강아세 두고 그래 되니 좀 쉽지 뭐 기여도 제산 되네기 계시네 기여도 되네기 슈그로스 삼밀 토네 되네기 베스제 리기 베스제가 리거로와 디나시 땅을 주기 땅아들이야 지게 거기 꽤 마타도 장주쌤기 판에 야보 토마도 다 장주쌤기 어디서be 삼로 숙침보데 레토 매바라와 대자 되네기다 교연 토야다 거기 교연 토야다 장주쌤기 판에 토야 되게 삼약고 제바이나 다 약고 주바이나 될래야 장주쌤기에게 답론 베스 제제 다 답론 가지 베스 제베나 장주쌤 게야 타니르 주고도 책으로와 제자 되네 자디 부단달라 디도시 다른 쪽에 삼로 되니시 당고고래 해서 아주 삼로 날로 되니시 장고고래 해서 돼 순고로 와다는 님보디
I think a very effective visual illustration to call to mind to show that one both needs to understand the fault of where you are as well as the benefits of where you can be to give an illustration of the strength of mind required. If you think back to a couple of years ago when the American military withdrew from Afghanistan and those scenes of desperation at the airport in those final days, of people handing over their children to strangers, of holding on to the outside of an aeroplane, this is a scene of great determination, a scene of great in the sense of that illustration, certainly a case of desperation. But for ourselves as practitioners, it's that level of determination that we need to cultivate. And such a level of determination has two aspects. One, seeing the faults of where you are, the grave danger of remaining where you are. And the second key aspect is seeing the great benefits of your potential destination. Both of those need to be recognized. So in terms of the mind of definite emergence, one recognizes the grave danger one is in as long as one remains bound in samsara and has a deep determination to achieve the goal of liberation. Likewise, for the aspirant bodhisattva, they recognize the plight of beings, and therefore they give rise to the determination to become a Buddha, so they can help beings in their desperation.
지산 디네 자당 안주 인도시나다 송여도 당하는 냠는 제가주의 당보 아니 기부 tes 딜레라와디 기부진다 중우다 투모알람 이름 발로장 디야고 차야도 되네 기부진다 투모알람 이름 발로장 되네 아니 디야고 차야도 되네 셈기게 판유 삼다야다 되네게 셈게 토유 돈여기 dum바기 되네 토베쳐도 돼 셈게 귤레 기베쳐도다 아치 균에맹가 뒤 삼다지도 신의 얌내지 어 차고래에서제 당 진발 마소나 도스치네 레에서지 마주게 도순 거와 대자당한 저기 디네게 삼당고에 차고래 얌내지 대자당한 저 가브릴리아 지조다 직심제서 배 연된 최고라 지시고제 기부 중원의 투모알람 이름 바세 배 중요라 삼다제 델리아 통중 나장은 저기 뜻이 야가지 삼다제 야가지 이제 아디진 얌내지에게 삼다도 중화정데 디네 중주 망시의 야고 메드디 야가디 야고 차에 갈래 하고로와 제자디 메로와 제자디네 자당한 만족 가브릴레다 아지 장유 심자를 빼마서 야고래다 기부 중원다 투모알람 이제데 중주래 디즈데 마제제 첨부도 전에 야가래 섬서 디데 섬고로와 삼제네 디네게 삼다에게 냠내제 리직 용용주다 가브레 삼로나 고고로와 디네 코바이네 미니 중주도 야고 마제바네 첨부도 야고 용할 갈래 하고 차대요 제자 디네자 단 그래서는 조어제다 제르미제다 디네게다 공부 루르블라서 바다 파와토멜라서 그런 저기 숭다다가라와 숭다 니 숭다의 상여 점내의 숭바다가나 도시 그런 저기 상여 점내의 당번에 마 충주 냠내 제림바 치워야지 디네 그런 저기 냠내제 냠용을 토네 안을 림바신의 되제바 차고라 제자데 디인장 안주인의 냠내 제바라 당보 기부 중원의 투모와 삼여 야고로 장 딜레야 삼야고다 디네 냠내 제는 안디 기부 중의 투모와 남바질로 장 디네 장시 셈기 파일 삼다야다 디네게 네 dum바기 제시점 토야치도 아니 유네맹에 둘러서 봐 로장고야 되는 바로 다라디 차고로 가다 니지시면 나디 영어 잡로 맞시면
What we've then looked at this morning, as well as last night, hopefully it's very clear, or it's been clearly established, that it's imperative that the way to train our minds is to first to focus on the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity and use that as our basis to then thereafter engage in the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. In this way, if we start at the beginning, progress, you will eventually be able to enter into the paths of the Mahayana, into the actual trainings of a practitioner of great capacity. By starting at the beginning, one develops skill in meditation, one becomes a skilled meditator. But of great importance too is that one's mind becomes much more focused because what one values is starting to change. Where one wants to put one's time, where one wants to put one's energy, what one sees as important, this is starting to change. This mind that is so distracted by the pursuit of mundane pleasures and so consumed with the various problems and difficulties in this world, these start to be seen as transient, as actually, in the greater scheme of things, having no real value. But what does have value is closing the door to the lower realms. And then one strives with the determination to not create causes that lead to the lower realms, but create causes for higher rebirths. In this way, one's mind starts to become more suitable to meditate on more challenging topics, such as the suffering of transient happiness and the suffering of all-pervasive conditioning. To be able to effectively meditate on them so that one's way of thinking is transformed, one needs to have some skill in meditation and a mind that is focused on these topics, not distracted to life's mundane pleasures and mundane problems. So this is how one then develops the skill within so that one can actually enter into the paths of the Mahayana. So I hope that this is really clear, because it's all too easy to be distracted to what appeals. And this is usually one is drawn to the higher practices and putting one's time and energy into really very advanced practices without having yet established the foundation. And then, despite years of some aspiration, one does not give rise to the results one had hoped for. Here I encourage you, do not see yourself as being, this is a modern time and therefore one needs a modern approach, but rather recognizing the mind of each being at a fundamental level is pretty much the same, dominated by the same kinds of afflictions, the same desire for happiness and wish to be free of problems. And this is as true today as it was a few centuries ago, as it was millennia ago. And the way that's presented here to train is how Lama Tsongkhapa himself trained, which is how Atisha trained, which is how Aryadeva trained, and his teacher too, Nagarjuna. The entirety of this lineage of training came from Buddha Shakyamuni, who himself, when an ordinary being, transformed his own mind by training first in the practices of a practitioner of initial capacity, thereafter the practices of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and eventually became a bodhisattva and the Buddha Shakyamuni. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for this morning. If you have some questions, though, then please feel free to ask. Cameron?
We were talking earlier about I lost my question. Maybe I'll have to come back. Has anyone else got a question?
Then this afternoon will be fine, Cameron. We can no problem. We can start with it this afternoon.
Oh, here we go. We talked about ordinary beings taking birth without any freedom. Yes. I just wanted to know, so we talk about ordinary beings not having free will, no free will. Do arhats have free will? And do Arya Bodhisattvas have free will?
So do Arya Bodhisattvas and Arhats, do they have free will? So correct, both Arya Bodhisattvas and all types of arhats, so the Theravada arhats, the solitary realized or Pratyeka Buddha arhats, or the Mahayana arhata Buddha, they have freedom over where they're born. So Arya Bodhisattvas and all forms of arhat, they have freedom over where they take rebirth.
Where they take birth, that's one thing, but free will.
That is free will. It's a free will. That is what is meant by free will.
Okay. Because we have different ideas of what.
Yes.
I think different people have different ideas of what free will is.
Yes.
Yeah. That was what I was asking.
Yeah. So there isn't in Tibetan there isn't a different word for free will. So to have freedom or free will would be the same thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe just before you dedicate, on clarity. So when Geshe talks, he talks about freedom. There isn't a different expression for free will. So as a translator, I use that because the meaning is we don't have free will. We don't have free will over, for example, our own mind, what arises in it.
Yeah.
Everything comes about in dependence on causes.
Yes.
So only by creating causes do we start to change a projection. But even the creation of causes comes about in dependence on other causes. So there isn't free will. But there isn't in Tibetan a separate word for free will. But that's something that I use.
My question was do our hearts?
Yes, they do. Yes,
They do.
Yeah, yeah. Because their mind is not out of control anymore.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That was effectively.
Yeah. So that is the case.
Yep.
I'll just make an observation on that. I think when we look at animals, they don't have a lot of free will compared to humans. So I think that analogy kind of establishes that humans train their mind to a certain degree more than animals.
Yep.
And the conditions created by humans are far superior conditions in that it gives them happiness or whatever, which animals tend to lack. So there itself we can see the distinction. So that's obviously way up there.
Yeah. Correct. And Seppo?
I think there was a very good. I found it very helpful when Geshe said a little while ago about this same idea, and Geshe said that if until you can really get some understanding of ignorance being the cause of all the suffering, and then what to do about that, how to sort of change that, then really people until you actually get that, people couldn't have really any free will or freedom. But once you get some understanding, you have you begin to get the freedom to decide how you behave, and later the freedom in many, many ways. Yeah. So I think that was also just really good on that question that comes up a lot in the West, I think. Yeah.
Yes, sir.